Before you settle in for this one, folks, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. You hit that bell, you won't miss a single story from the archives. And trust me, you don't want to miss where this one goes. It's a dark road. The year is 1911. The world is spinning toward modernity, with motor cars coughing down the avenues of St. Louis and electric lights chasing the shadows from Memphis. But where I was going, the 19th century hadn't just lingered. It had put down roots and refused to be evicted. My name is Eli Pope. I was by trade a journalist, or perhaps more accurately, a disgraced one. A dalliance with the wrong questions about the wrong powerful man had seen me politely, then firmly, dismissed from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. With my meager savings and a heavy valise full of notebooks, I had turned my ambitions toward folklore. The Ozarks, that rugged, misunderstood spine of America, called to me. I was hunting for the old songs, the ballads carried over from Scotland and Ireland, preserved in the amber of isolation. I was looking for songs. I found something else entirely. The mail wagon, little more than a buckboard pulled by two exhausted mules, left me at the crossroads. Whisper Creek is 2 miles down that track. The driver, a man of perhaps 50 words, 20 of which were "giddy up," muttered, pointing toward a path that looked less like a road and more like a scar. I walked. The air, thick and humid, clung to me like a shroud. The trees, oak, hickory, and massive ancient pines, formed a canopy so dense that the August sun was reduced to a few scattered golden coins on the forest floor. The silence was absolute, broken only by the buzz of cicadas that sounded like a frayed nerve, and the sudden startling cry of a hawk. After an hour, the path widened, and the trees reluctantly parted to reveal Whisper Creek. It wasn't a town. It was a wound in the wilderness. A dozen plankboard structures, gray and weary, huddled around a wide patch of mud that served as the main street. A general store, a livery, a blacksmith's forge belching black smoke, and a small whitewashed church whose steeple seemed to be leaning away from the woods, as if in fear. I stepped into the general store, the only place that seemed to show any sign of life. The bell above the door jangled, a weak, tinny sound. The air inside was a heavy perfume of cured tobacco, molasses, kerosene, and dust. A man behind the counter, thin as a rail with spectacles perched on a hawk-like nose, looked up from a ledger. He didn't smile. "Help ye?" "Afternoon. Name's Eli Pope. I've arranged to rent the old Sutton cabin for the month." His eyes, the color of muddy water, narrowed. He studied me, my city suit, my leather shoes, my valise. I was a foreigner, an alien. "Reckon I'm Silas Croft." He spat a stream of tobacco juice into a brass spittoon, the ping startlingly loud in the quiet. "Cabin's up the ridge. Keys here. Woods are full of haints and snakes. Best watch your step. I'm just here for songs, Mr. Croft. Folk songs." "Songs," he repeated, devoid of inflection. He slid a rusted iron key across the counter. "Folks around here ain't much for singing, Mr. Pope. Not lately. Too busy. Preparing." "Preparing? For what?" A woman in a calico dress, who I hadn't even noticed sitting by the cold potbelly stove, spoke without looking at me. Her voice was dry as corn husks. "For the revival. For the cleansing." Silas Croft shot her a look that would have frozen hot coffee. "Hush, Addie." He looked back at me. "Just a preacher, Mr. Pope. A traveling man bringing the word. Folks get stirred up." "I see," I said, though I didn't. The air in the store was tight, charged with an unspoken static. "Well, thank you for the key." As I turned to leave, the woman, Addie, whispered just loud enough for me to hear. "He ain't bringing the word, Silas. He's bringing the fire." "And the fire?" "It demands." I walked out into the oppressive humidity, the tinny bell announcing my departure. The sun was beginning to dip, painting the clouds in violent streaks of orange and purple. The woods around Whisper Creek seemed to lean in closer, the shadows stretching long and thin, like fingers reaching for the town. I gripped my valise, suddenly feeling like a man who had not just traveled miles but centuries into a place that time had rightly forgotten, and that God had, perhaps, forsaken. The journey to the Sutton cabin, up the darkling ridge, was the longest of my life. The Sutton cabin was less a home and more a suggestion of one. It stood in a small clearing, choked by weeds and poison ivy, about a mile above the town. The porch sagged. The windows were dark, vacant eyes. It smelled of mildew, cold ash, and the faint, musky scent of animals that had taken shelter within. But it was 4 walls, and it was mine for the month. I spent the first few days attempting to acclimate, which was like trying to acclimate to being buried. The isolation was profound. There was no noise from the town, only the constant sighing whisper of the wind through the pines, the sound that gave the creek its name. At night, the darkness was absolute, a heavy, velvet thing that pressed against the thin glass of the windows. I tried to work. I ventured into town once to buy supplies. The reception was unchanged. Silas Croft measured out my flour and salt pork in judgmental silence. The few other residents I saw, gaunt men in overalls, women who looked old before their time, would either nod curtly or, more often, simply stop and stare as I passed, their faces blank, their eyes hollow. On the 3rd day, I decided to explore the ridges. I was looking for the old-timers, the granny women or the mountain patriarchs who might still hold the ancient ballads. I followed a game trail, pushing through thickets of rhododendron and laurel. The forest floor was a carpet of damp leaves that muffled my footsteps. After an hour, I came upon a cabin tucked so deep into a hollow I nearly missed it. It was smaller than my own, but better kept. A thin ribbon of wood smoke rose from a fieldstone chimney. In the yard, a woman was tending a garden. She was old, not just old, but ancient, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, her hair the color of spun silver, braided tight. She moved with a stiff, economical grace, pulling weeds from around her tomato vines. I cleared my throat. "Excuse me, ma'am." She straightened, not with a start, but with a slow, deliberate movement. She held a small, curved blade used for cutting herbs. Her eyes, unlike the muddy, vacant eyes in town, were sharp and bright, the color of a winter sky. I'm sorry to intrude. My name is Eli Pope. I'm staying at the Sutton place." She wiped her hands on her apron. "I know who ye are. The song catcher. Heard ye in town. Heard you walking up this ridge. You tread heavy for a city man." Yes. I was hoping to ask if you knew any of the old songs. Ballads. Barbara Allen. The Twa Sisters." The old woman chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Songs. Aye, I know the songs. Know the stories, too. Know the difference tween a song and a prayer, and tween a prayer and a curse. Which one are ye huntin'?" "Just the songs, ma'am. For history. To preserve them." "Preserve," she mused. She gestured to a nearby stump. "Sit." I did. She remained standing, the blade still in her hand. "Name's Elspeth. Folks call me Granny Elspeth. Some call me worse." "It's a pleasure, Granny Elspeth. We'll see." She squinted at me. "You come at a bad time, Mr. Pope. The air's gone sour. The ground's gone hard. The drought? No, not the weather. The folk. They're coiled tight, like a copperhead fixin' to strike." "The revival," I said, remembering the woman in the store. "Mr. Croft mentioned a preacher." Granny Elspeth's face darkened. The change was palpable. "He ain't no preacher, not of any God I ever knew. He's a divider. He digs up what's buried. He finds the cracks in folk and wedges 'em wide open." "Who is he?" "Calls himself Brother Malachi," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "He's been on the ridges for a month south of here. Now he's come to Whisper Creek. He talks of fire. He talks of cleansing. But when you burn the rot, Mr. Pope, you sometimes burn the house. And this valley, it's got a deep, dark cellar." I felt a chill, despite the humid air. "What do you mean?" "This land is old. Older than the church steeple. Older than the book. It remembers blood. It remembers fire. And it hungers for 'em. Malachi is ringing the dinner bell, and the folk down there, they're sharpening the knives." "That's very descriptive, ma'am. But surely it's just fervor? It'll pass." She gave me a look of profound pity. "You're a man who looks, but don't see. You hear words, but not the tune beneath them. This ain't fervor. It's a fever, and it's fixin' to break." She turned back to her garden. "I know your songs, Mr. Pope, but I ain't singing 'em today. My throat's tight with the smell of smoke and there ain't no fire been lit. Not yet. I stood up, feeling dismissed. Thank you for your time, Granny. As I walked away, her voice followed me, strong and clear. You best leave Whisper Creek, songcatcher. There's only one song gonna be sung here, and it's a dirge. I didn't run, but my pace back to the cabin was hurried. That night I sat by my cold fireplace, the oil lamp casting flickering monstrous shadows. I tried to write, to categorize the encounter, but Granny Elspeth's words echoed in my head. He ain't no preacher, he's a divider. From my ridge, I could see the lights of Whisper Creek far below. Usually, they were a few scattered yellow squares, extinguished by 9. Tonight, there were more. Torches, a great many of them, moving in a line from the town, heading toward the wide, flat clearing by the creek bed. The wind shifted, and for the first time, I heard it, faintly, on the breeze. It was singing, but it wasn't a hymn I recognized. It was a chant, rhythmic and low, with a savage energy that made the hair on my arms stand on end. The revival had begun. I am not a religious man, but I am a curious one. It is the journalist's blessing and his curse. For 2 nights I stayed in my cabin, listening to the distant rhythmic chanting that pulsed from the valley, a heartbeat of fervor I could feel in the soles of my feet. On the 3rd night, I could stand it no longer. I took my notebook, a pencil, and my skepticism, and made my way down the ridge, moving through the trees like a common trespasser. I kept to the shadows, the moon a pale sliver behind a shroud of clouds. The clearing was large, carved from the forest years ago for logging that had since moved on. Now it was filled with people, perhaps 50 or 60 souls, the entire population of Whisper Creek and the surrounding hollows. They were gathered before a crude, newly built wooden stage. The air was electric. It was heavy with the scent of pine, sweat, and something else. A sharp ozonic tang, like the air before a lightning strike. And then I saw him. Brother Malachi. He was not what I expected. I had pictured a gaunt, fire and brimstone scarecrow. Malachi was impressive. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with a great mane of iron-gray hair that he tossed back like a lion. He wore a simple black suit, but it seemed to hang on him with the authority of a king's robes. But it was his voice that held them. It was not a shout. It was a resonant baritone that wrapped around the clearing, that seemed to come from the trees themselves. And I tell you, the good Lord is aweary. He is weary of your lukewarm faith. He is weary of the sin that clings to these hills like the kudzu vine, choking the life from the righteous. Amen, roared a man in the front. I recognized him, Jebediah Sutri, a farmer whose land bordered the clearing. A man known to be quiet, almost gentle. His face was now twisted in ecstasy. You have prayed for rain, Malachi boomed, his arms spreading wide. You have prayed for bounty, but your prayers are unclean. They are fouled by the doubt in your hearts, by the sin in your blood, by the shadows that walk among you. He paused, letting the silence stretch. The crowd was utterly still. The good book tells us of the flood. He continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He cleansed the world with water, but the rot returned. Because water is not enough. Water washes the skin, but it cannot wash the soul. For the soul, my friends, for the deep abiding sickness in the heart of man, you need fire. Fire! The crowd roared back, the word a single sharp explosion. I scribbled furiously in my notebook, my hand shaking slightly. This was beyond fervor. This was ignition. The old covenant is broken, Malachi cried. The covenant of water is done. Tonight we make a new covenant, a covenant of the hills, a covenant of the cleansing flame. We will burn the sickness from our hearts. We will burn the doubt from our minds. We will burn the unbeliever from our midst. At this, a palpable wave of energy moved through the crowd. They turned, as one, looking at each other, their eyes bright and manic in the torchlight. They were no longer neighbors. They were judges. Look at your brother, Malachi commanded. Is he pure? Look at your neighbor. Is her heart true? Or do they harbor the shadow? Do they harbor the doubt that curses your crops, that sickens your children? I saw Jeb Sutri's wife, Sarah, a frail woman weeping with a strange, joyful terror. Malachi raised his hands. The Lord has shown me the way. He has shown me the sign of his purifying judgment, not the cross of sacrifice, but the cross of victory, the cross of flame that will burn away the dross and leave only the righteous. We will build this sign. We will raise it high, and it will be a beacon, a judgment, a promise. He was a master orator. He built them up with fear, then offered them a single terrible solution. He was giving them permission. Permission to judge, permission to hate, permission to cleanse. I watched, hidden in the shadows, as the meeting reached its zenith. They sang. They wept. They spoke in tongues, a frightening guttural chorus that echoed off the ridges. Malachi laid his hands on them, and they fell back, slain in the spirit, their bodies twitching in the dirt. I felt a cold knot of dread in my stomach. Granny Elspeth was right. This was no simple revival. This was the forging of a weapon. Malachi was the smith, the clearing was his forge, and the souls of Whisper Creek were the hot, pliable metal. As the meeting began to break, the crowd dissolving into small, agitated groups, I slipped back into the trees. My retreat was silent, but I felt as if 100 pairs of eyes were following me into the darkness. When I reached my cabin, I locked the door, something I hadn't bothered to do before. I sat in the dark. The image of Malachi's triumphant face burned into my memory. I tried to rationalize it. It's just words, I told myself. Hysteria. It will burn itself out by morning. But as I looked out my window, toward the clearing, I saw that a handful of men, including Jeb Sutri, had not left. They had retrieved axes and lanterns. By the light of the torches, they walked to the edge of the woods, to a stand of truly ancient, massive pines. I watched, my blood running cold, as Jeb Sutri raised his axe. The clean, sharp thwack of the blade biting into wood echoed across the valley. They weren't just talking about their fiery sign. They had begun to build it. Before we go any deeper into this valley, I need to ask you to do me a favor. If you're finding yourself pulled into this story, hit that subscribe button. We're digging up things that have been buried for a long time, and you're not going to want to be left behind. Hit the bell too. You'll be the first to know when the next chapter drops. The sound of the axes haunted my sleep. I drifted in and out of nightmares filled with fire and splintered wood, waking with a start, my heart hammering, only to hear the real, rhythmic chunk, chunk, chunk from the valley below. They worked through the night. When dawn broke, a gray, joyless light filtered through the trees. The chopping had stopped. A heavy, exhausted silence had fallen. I forced myself to go down to the town. I needed supplies, but more than that, I needed to see their faces in the daylight. I needed to reassure myself that the moonlight and the torchlight had played tricks on me, that these were just simple farmers, not the frenzied zealots I had witnessed. I was wrong. The town was changed. The lethargy was gone, replaced by a tense, brittle energy. People moved with purpose, in small, tight groups. They spoke in low, urgent tones, and would fall silent the moment they saw me. I walked into Silas Croft's store. This time, I was not the only customer. Jeb Sutri was there, his face haggard from a night of labor, his eyes burning with a feverish light. He was buying every keg of lamp oil and kerosene Croft had. "Morning, Mr. Sutri," I said, my voice sounding unnaturally loud. He turned. The quiet, gentle man I'd been told about was gone. His eyes, when they met mine, were flat and hard, like stones. "Morning, Mr. Pope." "Big plans for all that oil?" I asked, attempting a casual tone. Jeb stared at me. "Pest control," he said. His voice was raw. "Burning out the rot, the borers in the wood, the blight." Silas Croft, who had once seemed the most rational man in town, just nodded in grim agreement, marking the purchase in his ledger. "The Lord's work is hard work, Jeb." "Amen, Silas. The Lord's work." Jeb and two other men hauled the kegs onto a wagon. As he turned, I saw it. On the lapel of his denim overalls, a new adornment. It was a small thing, crudely whittled from a twig, lashed together with twine. It was a cross, but not a simple crucifix. It was a cross with two extra diagonal bars, like a star or a symbol of chaos. It was barbed and sharp. I left the store. my small purchase of coffee and bacon clutched in my hand. I saw it again. On the woman, Addie, sweeping her porch. On the blacksmith, hammering at his forge. On the children playing a silent, watchful game in the mud. They were all wearing it, the mark of the covenant. I felt a sudden, desperate need to see Elspeth. I practically ran up the ridge to her hollow. She was on her porch, rocking slowly, a shotgun laid across her lap. "You saw it," she said. It wasn't a question. "They're wearing a symbol, a twisted cross." Aye. She spat onto the dirt. "The mark. He's branded them. Branded them like cattle for his slaughter. He's given their fear a shape." "Elspeth, what is this? What does he want?" She rocked for a moment, the chair creaking in a mournful rhythm. "He wants what all men like him want, power. But Malachi's different. He ain't just feeding his own pride. He's feeding something else." "What's something else?" "I told you, the land. This ain't the first time, Mr. Pope. This valley, it has revivals. Every 30 years or so, the sickness bubbles up. A sickness of the soul. It demands a tithe. It demands a fire. Malachi, he's just the new preacher for a very old, very hungry God." I sat on the step, the reality of my situation settling on me like a physical weight. I was trapped. There was one road out, and it ran straight through Whisper Creek. "They're building something in the clearing, from the pines." "The cross," she said, her voice heavy with dread. "The beacon, the pyre. He'll tell 'em it's to signal God. He'll tell 'em it's to burn away the sin of the valley. But it's an altar, Mr. Pope. Plain and simple. And every altar demands a sacrifice." "Who?" I whispered, though I already knew the answer. Granny Elspeth stopped rocking. She looked at me, her ancient eyes filled with a terrible, clear sadness. "The sickness needs a focus. It needs a scapegoat. It needs the unclean." She gestured to her garden, to her shelves of herbs and tinctures. "I am the healer, the Yarb woman, the one who walks her own path. In their new clean world, they call that witch." She then looked me dead in the eye. "And you are the foreigner, the unbeliever, the spy, the man with the notebook, writing down their secrets. You are the doubt Malachi preaches against." A cold sweat broke out on my skin. They wouldn't. They're Americans. It's 1911. It's 1911 in St. Louis, son. Here," she gestured to the oppressive looming trees. "Here, it's always 1692. And the congregation is already deciding on the verdict." She picked up the shotgun. "You best go back to your cabin. Bar the door. But don't ye be there when they come. That place is a tinderbox." "What will you do?" "I am of these hills," she said, her voice hard as the stone chimney. "I do not run from them. I know the woods better than they do. I know the hollows. And I know the old ways. Malachi ain't the only one who remembers them." I left her, my mind reeling. My cabin, which had felt like a refuge, now seemed like a trap. When I got back, I did as she said. I barred the door. I stuffed my few important belongings, my money, my father's watch, and my notebooks, into a canvas satchel. As night fell, the chanting began again. But it was different. It was no longer pleading. It was no longer joyful. It was a hunting song. And from my window, I saw the first sign. Far below, on the door of the little church, the one place that should have been a sanctuary, Jeb Sutri and 2 other men were painting. They were using pitch, black and thick. They painted a massive barbed cross on the church doors. They had marked God's house as their own. The town was sealed. The fragile peace of the valley was broken. The next 2 days were a descent. The air itself felt diseased, thick with suspicion. The building in the clearing continued, a monstrous carpentry project hidden by the trees, but the sounds of saws and hammers were constant. I rationed my food, afraid to go back into town. I was, effectively, a prisoner on my own ridge. I spent the hours writing, documenting everything I had seen, a frantic, desperate act of witness. If they came for me, I would leave this. I would hide the notebooks under the floorboards. Someone had to know. On the 3rd day after the branding, a new sound cut through the air. It wasn't chanting. It was a scream, a high, thin wail of pure agony coming from the valley floor. I crept to the edge of the ridge, my stomach in knots. The scream was coming from the Suttree farm, the one closest to the revival clearing. I watched, helpless, for nearly an hour. The screaming would rise, then fall into a choked-off moaning, then rise again. I saw figures moving around the small farmhouse, the townspeople. Then I saw Brother Malachi arrive. He strode onto their porch like he owned it. He raised his hands and the screaming stopped, abruptly. The silence that followed was, if possible, more terrifying. A little while later, Jeb Suttree himself burst from the house. He was not the zealot I had seen in the store. He was a broken man. He fell to his knees in the yard, his shoulders shaking. Curiosity, or perhaps a foolish, lingering ember of journalistic instinct, overrode my fear. I had to know. I circled the ridge, staying deep in the woods, until I was in the trees overlooking the Suttree farm. Jeb was still on his knees. Malachi came out onto the porch. He put a hand on Jeb's shoulder. I was too far to hear his words, but the posture was one of comfort, of absolution. After several minutes, Malachi raised his voice, not in a sermon, but in a proclamation, so that the gathered townsfolk could hear. "And the Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. But I tell you, this was not the Lord. This was the sickness, the blight, the doubt that you have allowed to fester among you." He pointed, not at the house, but toward the ridges, toward the shadows. "The unbeliever walks your hills, the witch whispers her curses on the wind. They have seen your faith, and they have poisoned your well. Sarah Suttree. Sarah Suttree has been struck down by the sin of the unclean." A collective gasp and a low, angry murmur rose from the crowd. Sarah Suttree, Jeb's wife, the frail woman I'd seen weeping at the revival. She is gone?" Jeb choked out, looking up at the preacher. "Her body is still here, brother," Malachi said, his voice dropping. "But her soul is in contention. The shadow has its hooks in her. We prayed. We sang the hymn of the flame. But the faith of this valley is weak. It is divided." He let the accusation hang in the air. "What do we do, brother?" cried Addie, the woman from the store. "Tell us." "We must strengthen the covenant," Malachi roared. "The Lord has given me the vision. The sickness in that house," he pointed to the Suttree cabin, "is a reflection of the sickness in these hills. We cannot heal the one until we purge the other." He was a monster, a brilliant, silver-tongued monster. He had taken this poor woman's illness, be it appendicitis or cholera or simple fever, and he had weaponized it. He had turned her suffering into a rallying cry. "Jebediah Suttree," Malachi called. Jeb, his face pale and streaked with tears, stood up. He was a man hollowed out, ready to be filled. "Brother, the Lord sees your pain. He sees your faith, but he demands a test. Are you with him, or are you with the shadows that struck your wife?" I am with him," Jeb whispered, his voice trembling. "Then prove it. Be the hand of his judgment. Be the fire that cleanses. The ritual is almost prepared. The cross stands ready. But it demands consecration. It demands the offering. We must find the source of the blight. We must find the doubters, the healers, the spies, and we must bring them to the altar." "The altar," Jeb repeated, his eyes gaining that terrifying, feverish light once more. The broken man was gone. The zealot was back, forged anew in grief and rage. "Find them," Malachi commanded, his voice a low, sibilant hiss. "Find the old woman on the ridge. Find the song catcher in the Sutton cabin. They are the root of this curse. Bring them. Bring them to the cleansing, and your wife, Sarah, will be delivered." I didn't wait to hear more. I scrambled back through the undergrowth, my heart a trapped bird against my ribs. It was no longer a vague threat. It was a decree, a death sentence. They had a target. They had a reason. And now, they had a hunter. Jeb Suttree, a man who believed he was fighting for his wife's very soul, would be unstoppable. The night of the burning cross was no longer a distant threat. It was coming. It was tonight. I made it back to my cabin, my lungs burning. The sun was already a bloody smear in the west, sinking behind the jagged line of the pines. The woods grew dark with astonishing speed. I was a fool. I had stayed too long. I grabbed my satchel, shoving my notebooks inside. I checked my pockets, my watch, a pocket knife, a small box of matches. It was pitiful. Bar the door. But don't ye be there when they come. Granny Elspeth's words. I had to get to her. She knew the woods. She was my only chance. I kicked the floorboards loose near the hearth, the ones I had identified earlier. I stuffed 2 of my notebooks into the dark, earthy space beneath. Not all of them, but enough. If I didn't make it, someone, someday, might find them. I was about to unbar the door and make a run for the woods when I heard it. It wasn't a shout. It was the baying of a hound. They weren't just coming with torches. They were coming with dogs. I froze, my hand on the wooden bar. Peeking through a crack in the window shutters, I saw them. Not 1 dog, but 3. Lean, hungry-looking hunting dogs, straining at their leashes. And behind them, a mob. At least 20 men, their faces illuminated by the bobbing, demonic light of pine knot torches. They were carrying rifles, shotguns, and farm implements, scythes, pitchforks, that now looked like medieval weapons of war. And at their head, his face a mask of righteous fury, was Jeb Suttree. Beside him, pointing up at my cabin, was Silas Croft, the storekeeper. "He's in there!" Silas shrieked, his thin voice cracking. "The furriner! He's the one! He brought the blight!" "Mister..." "Pope!" Jeb roared, his voice thick with rage and grief. "Come out! Come out and face the Lord's judgment. You've been found wanton." The dogs barked and snapped, desperate to be let loose. My blood turned to ice. There was no escape. The cabin was surrounded. "Burn him out!" someone yelled from the back. "Burn the sickness out!" "No!" Malachi's voice cut through the din. He was here. He stood just behind Jeb, his arms folded, a figure of calm, terrible authority. He must be taken alive. The cleansing demands a willing witness. He must be brought to the cross, not sent by smoke. He wants me to watch, I realized with a jolt of horror. He wants me to see it all before I die. "Pope!" Jeb bellowed again. "Last chance! Open this door!" I said nothing. I pressed my back against the far wall, my mind racing. The cabin had 1 door and 2 windows. No cellar, no attic. It was a box, a trap. Thud! The sound of a heavy axe bit into the door. They weren't waiting. Thud! Thud! The heavy oak door was thick, but it wouldn't last. Shouts erupted from outside. "Put your shoulder to it!" A massive crash shook the entire cabin as 3 men used a log as a makeshift battering ram. The doorframe splintered. "He's at the window!" someone screamed. A shotgun blast exploded, and the window to my left disintegrated into a spray of glass and wood splinters. I dove to the floor, glass raining down on me. Crash! The battering ram struck again. The hinges groaned. I had 1 chance. The back wall. The chinking between the logs was old, rotten in places. I had my pocket knife. It was desperate. It was insane. While they hammered the front, I scrambled to the back wall, in the deepest shadow. I jammed my knife into the crumbling mortar and clay. It gave way. I dug with my fingers, my knife frantic like a burrowing animal. Crash! The door burst open. "He's in here! Get him!" A man charged in, silhouetted against the torchlight. I saw the glint of a rifle barrel. There he is, by the wall. I didn't wait. I turned and threw my entire body weight against the weakened logs. It was a 1,000,000 to 1 chance. The rotten timber, weakened by a century of damp, gave. It didn't make a door, just a ragged, splintered hole, barely wide enough for a man. "He's getting out the back." I tumbled through the hole, landing hard on the damp earth, thorns and briars tearing at my face and clothes. "Loose the hounds!" I heard Silas Croft scream. I scrambled to my feet. I could hear the dogs released, howling with a new, frenzied hunger. I ran. I ran with no thought for direction, only away. Away from the light, away from the sounds, deeper into the pitch-black, unforgiving embrace of the Ozark forest. Behind me, the mob crashed through the undergrowth, their torches a vision of hell, their shouts and the baying of the dogs the soundtrack to my own demise. Chapter 7. The Granny Witch's Sanctuary. The woods at night are a different world. The familiar ridges and hollows of the day become a labyrinth of black trees and bottomless shadows. I ran blind, fueled by a terror so pure it was almost liquid. Branches whipped my face. Thorns tore at my coat. I stumbled, fell, and rose again, my lungs on fire. Behind me, the dogs were closing the gap. Their baying was no longer a general cry, but a focused, sharp sound. They had my scent. The torchlights of the mob bobbed and weaved behind them, a fractured, fiery serpent chasing me through the dark. "Yonder!" I heard Jeb's voice cry out. "He's heading for the old woman's hollow. He's running to the witch." He was right. Subconsciously, my feet had carried me toward the only soul in this valley who wasn't part of the madness, Granny Elspeth. I broke through a thicket of laurel and tumbled down a sharp incline, landing in the shallow, rocky creek that ran past her cabin. The freezing water was a shock, but it gave me an idea. I ran up the creek, splashing through the water, trying to mask my scent. The dogs paused at the bank, howling in confusion. It bought me precious seconds. I saw the dim yellow light of her cabin window. I scrambled up the bank, mud and water sluicing from my clothes. "Granny!" I yelled, hammering on her door. "Elspeth, let me in! They're coming!" The door was unbarred instantly. She pulled me inside with a strength that belied her age and slammed the heavy oak plank shut, dropping a thick wooden bar into place. "I told you not to be at your cabin," she hissed, her face grim in the lamplight. Her shotgun was leaning against the wall. "The dogs. I panted, collapsing against the wall. "You brought 'em right to me, Songcatcher." She wasn't angry, it was a statement of fact. "Well, so be it. I've been expecting 'em." The cabin was one room, but it was a fortress compared to mine. The walls were thick, the chimney was stone, and the windows were small, heavy shutters, not glass. She moved with a calm, focused energy, dousing the oil lamp, plunging the room into near-total darkness. Only the faint, dying glow of the embers in the hearth remained. "Get away from the door," she commanded. Outside, the hounds arrived, scratching and howling at the cabin walls. Then, the mob. "She's in there." Silas Croft's reedy voice. "The witch and the furriner, they're together. Granny Elspeth." Jeb Suttree's voice was different now, not just angry, but pleading. "Brother Malachi says ye have a choice. Give us the man and ye can repent. Ye can be cleansed." Elspeth moved to a small slit in the wall, a loophole for a rifle. "Go home, Jebediah," she shouted, her voice ringing with authority. "You're being played for a fool. That man ain't a preacher, he's a thief, and he's stealing your soul." "She's blaspheming," someone cried. "She's confessing," yelled another. "Brother Malachi," Jeb called out, his voice cracking. "She won't listen. The sin is too deep in her." I heard Malachi's calm, resonant voice, floating through the dark. "Then the judgment is clear. The nest must be burned. The blight must be purged with fire. The covenant demands it." A terrible silence fell. Then I smelled it. Kerosene. They were splashing it on the walls. "Elspeth," I whispered in horror. "Knew they would," she said, her voice tight. "They are cowards. All bullies are." I heard the scratch of a match. Fire in the name of the cleansing flame. Whoosh! The front porch erupted in fire. Orange light flooded through the cracks in the door and shutters. The cabin began to fill with smoke almost immediately. The wood was old, dry as tinder. "They're burning us alive," I choked, my eyes watering. "They are," Elspeth said. She grabbed my arm, her grip like iron. "But ye ain't dying here." "What? What do you mean?" "This cabin is old. My grandpappy built it, and he built it to escape the revenue men." She pulled me toward the large stone hearth. The fire inside was just embers. To the side, beneath a pile of firewood, was a large flat stone. "The root cellar," she said, coughing as the smoke thickened. "It opens out into the creek bed, 20 yards downstream. Get in." She heaved the stone aside, revealing a black, square hole. "What about you?" I grasped her arm. "Come with me." She shook her head, her silver hair illuminated by the firelight that was now licking at the edges of the window. "I am of these hills, Mr. Pope. I told ye. I do not run. You'll die. Maybe. But I'll take a few of these godless fools with me." She grabbed her shotgun. "They think they're burning a witch. They're about to find out what one is." "Elspeth, no. Go." She shoved me toward the hole. "You're the witness. You're the song catcher. Go sing this song. Tell 'em what ye saw. Tell 'em what they did. The heat was becoming unbearable. The roof was catching. "Now!" she roared. I hesitated, my heart breaking. "Tell him, Eli!" she yelled, using my first name. It was a command. I dropped into the darkness. The stone scraped shut above me, plunging me into absolute blackness. I heard the thud as she dropped the bar on the cellar door. Above me, I heard the cabin door splinter open. I heard the mob yell as they charged into the smoke, and then I heard the twin blasts of Granny Elspeth's shotgun. Screams, curses, the roar of the fire. I turned and crawled on my hands and knees through the damp, narrow tunnel, the sounds of the massacre above me fading, replaced by the pounding of my own blood and the roar of the inferno that was consuming the last good soul in Whisper Creek. The cellar tunnel was a grave. It was narrow, suffocating, and smelled of damp earth and rot. I crawled, my satchel banging against my side, my knees and hands scraping raw on the stones. The air was thin and my lungs, already full of smoke, burned with every breath. I had no idea how far I had gone when the tunnel began to slope upward. I felt a faint, cool draft on my face. A few more feet, and my hands met not stone, but a tangle of roots and earth. I pushed. The roots gave way, and I spilled out, gasping, onto the muddy bank of the creek, hidden by a curtain of hanging moss and ivy. I was 20 yards from the cabin, just as she'd said. I looked back. The hollow was lit as bright as day. The cabin was a roaring pillar of flame, a pagan funeral pyre sending sparks and cinders spiraling into the night sky. The silhouettes of the Covenanters danced around it, raising their rifles and pitchforks, screaming in a mix of terror and triumph. I saw 2 bodies being dragged from the flames. The men who had been at the front of the line. Elspeth had kept her word. A new, deeper roar of rage went up from the crowd. "She ain't here! The witch ain't in the ashes!" "The cellar," Jeb's voice. "Look for the cellar. Her and the foreigner got out. They would find the tunnel entrance." I couldn't stay. I slipped into the creek and moved downstream, crouching in the icy water, using the bank for cover. The woods were alive with the shouts of the mob, fanning out, searching. They were enraged, emboldened by the fire and blood. I had to hide. But where? Then I remembered. The clearing, the place where it all began. It was the last place they would look for me. They were all out hunting. The revival clearing itself would be empty. Or so I prayed. I left the creek, creeping through the woods, moving ridge to ridge, paralleling the valley. I was guided by the one landmark that now dominated the night, the glow. It wasn't just the burning cabin. A different, more terrible light was coming from the direction of the clearing, a massive, pulsing red glow that painted the underside of the clouds. They had lit it. My stomach twisted. I moved toward it, a moth to a flame I both feared and needed to see. I crept to the edge of the woods that bordered the great clearing. I dropped to my belly, crawling the last few feet. What I saw will never leave me. It was massive. The burning cross was not a cross at all, not in the Christian sense. It was the thing I had seen on their lapels, the barbed, star-like sigil made manifest. It was built of the ancient pines they had felled, perhaps 40 feet high, soaked in the kerosene Jeb had bought. And it was on fire, a colossal, roaring bonfire that threw a hellish red-orange light over the entire valley. It crackled and snapped, a living, hungry thing. But the fire was not the most terrible part. The townspeople were there, the ones who hadn't joined the hunt. The women, the children, the elderly. They were gathered in a wide circle around the burning effigy. They were dancing. It was not a dance of joy. It was a frenzied, convulsive, horrifying dance. They jerked and twitched, their bodies moving to a rhythm that wasn't there, their heads thrown back, their mouths open and silent, or perhaps screaming. I couldn't hear over the fire. Ecstasy. They were lost, utterly gone. And there, standing on the preacher's stage, silhouetted against the inferno, was Brother Malachi. He was not preaching. He was just watching. His arms were spread wide, his head tilted back as if basking in the heat and the madness. He was the conductor of this orchestra of the damned. Then I saw the one still point in the chaos, Sarah Suttree. She was not in her cabin. They had brought her here. She was strapped, tied to a wooden chair, placed near the stage, facing the fire. She was pale, her eyes wide with a terror so profound it had gone past screaming. She was the patient, forced to watch this nightmare ritual supposedly being performed for her salvation. This was the covenant. This was the cleansing. It was a mass pagan hysteria, a sacrifice of sanity to an old burning god. I lay in the dirt, my mind fractured. Elspeth was gone. The town was lost. The world had gone insane. I felt a sudden sharp pain in my shoulder. I gasped, thinking I'd been shot. I looked. It was a hand, a heavy, calloused hand gripping my coat. I turned my head slowly, my blood freezing solid. A man was kneeling over me. His face, smeared with soot and sweat, was inches from mine. It was Jeb Suttree. He hadn't been with the hunters. He had been here, guarding the ritual. His eyes were not the eyes of a fanatic. They were the eyes of a man in bottomless grief. He looked from me to the fire, and then to his wife, strapped to the chair. He put a finger to his lips. Then he whispered 4 words that changed everything. He lied to me. Chapter 9. The Confession of Jebediah Suttree. My mind couldn't process it. I was caught. This was the end. But the hand on my shoulder wasn't crushing me. The voice wasn't a roar of triumph. It was a broken whisper. Jeb Suttree's face was a ruin. The fever was gone, replaced by a cold, horrifying clarity. The firelight danced in his eyes, which were filled with tears. He lied, he whispered again, his voice cracking. He dragged me back, deeper into the shadows, away from the edge of the clearing. His strength was immense. He pulled me behind a massive boulder, out of sight of the stage. "Jeb." "What?" I stammered. "Shh." He put his back against the rock, his shotgun held loose in his lap. He was shaking. I went back. After the fire at Elspeth's. You were there," I accused, my voice trembling. I set the first torch," he confessed, and a sob tore through him. "I thought," he told me, "she was a witch, that she'd cursed Sarah, that her fire would be Sarah's cure." He wiped his face with a shaking hand. "But after we found the bodies, the men after the fire, I felt cold. The rage was gone. There was just ash." He stared at his hands. "I ran back to my home to check on Sarah. Malachi had forbidden it. He said my doubt would spoil the ritual. She wasn't there. I realized. He'd already taken her. She was gone. But the young un, Mary, she was hiding under the bed. She's Addie's girl, been helping with Sarah. She saw it. She saw him." "Saw Malachi?" "Aye. He came before the hunt, while I was gathering the men. He came with Silas Croft, and he gave Sarah a potion for the pain. Mary saw it. He held her head back and made her drink, and she started screaming. That's when I heard her from the ridge. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The screaming. It wasn't the illness. It was the potion." Jeb wept. "It was him. He poisoned her. He made her sick. He did this, all of this. He needed a sacrifice. He needed a reason. He used my Sarah. He used me. The man who had been my hunter, my would-be killer, was now my only ally. And he was utterly destroyed." "Jeb," I said, my voice hardening, "look at me." He wouldn't. "Look at me." He raised his head, his eyes meeting mine. "He is a monster. But he's just one man. Your town, they're lost." "It's the fire," Jeb whispered, looking past me at the roaring effigy. It does something to them. It gets in their heads. The singing, the chanting. It's like a drug. We have to get your wife." "How?" he said, the hopelessness complete. "There's 50 of them out there, Eli, and the hunters, the ones at Elspeth's. They'll be back soon. They'll come here to the cross." He was right. This was the epicenter. The hunting party would return here, either with me as a captive or to report their failure. "We need a distraction," I said, my mind racing. "A big one." "There ain't nothing bigger than that," he said, gesturing to the 40-foot inferno. And then I saw it. On the edge of the clearing, near the wagons, the supplies, the kegs, the kerosene kegs Jeb himself had bought. "Jeb," I said, gripping his arm, "how much oil did you buy?" 10 kegs, maybe 12. "Where are they?" "By the wagons." They kept them to keep the fire fed, to anoint the unclean." He meant me. "And Elspeth. He used your grief, Jeb. He used your faith. He turned you into a monster, and he did it to feed that." I pointed to the fire. Jeb Suttrie's gaze followed mine. He looked at the fire, at the grotesque, twitching dance of his neighbors. He looked at Brother Malachi, arms raised, a false prophet before his pagan idol. And then he looked at his wife, Sarah, tied to that chair, her body trembling, a prisoner of the very ritual meant to save her. Something in him snapped. The grief turned, in an instant, to a pure, cold element. It was rage, but not the hot, blind rage of the zealot. It was the cold, hard rage of the executioner. He stood up, his 6'4" frame blocking the firelight. He picked up his shotgun. "You're right, Mr. Pope." His voice was no longer a whisper. It was a low, steady rumble. "He ain't no preacher." He checked the shells in his gun. "He's the blight." "What's the plan, Jeb?" I asked, my heart hammering. "We ain't stopping that fire. We can't." He looked at the dancers, lost in their ecstatic nightmare. "And we can't fight them. They ain't themselves. So what? We just walk in?" "No. We give them what they want. A second revival." He pointed to the kegs of kerosene stacked neatly near the supply wagons, maybe 30 yards from where we hid. "Malachi. He's a talker. He loves his own voice. You'll have to stop him. You'll have to give him a new sermon to consecrate the fire." "Jeb, I don't understand. You're the distraction. I'm the deliverance." He looked at me, his eyes hard. "When I move, you run. Not away. You run at 'em." "What?" "Run into the clearing. Yell. Scream. Act crazy. They all think you're the devil. Act it. They'll stop. They'll all turn to look at ye. Even Malachi. He'll think his prey has come to him. He won't be able to resist. They'll kill me. They'll try," Jeb corrected, "but they'll be confused. Their heads are full of fire and chance. They'll pause, and in that pause, I'm getting my wife, and I'm getting those kegs." It was insane. It was a suicide mission. But as I looked at Sarah Suttrie, her body limp against the ropes, I knew it was the only way. "All right," I said, my voice shaking. "All right. Wait for the sermon," Jeb cautioned. "He's gonna build him up again. When he's at his loudest, that's when the devil comes to church." We waited. The dancing went on for what felt like an eternity. The fire crackled and roared. Then, as Jeb predicted, Malachi raised his hands. "Be still!" he roared. His voice, amplified by the night and the strange acoustics of the clearing, cut through the fervor. The dancers staggered to a halt. They stood, weaving, panting, their eyes glazed, all fixed on their prophet. "The covenant is sealed in smoke," Malachi cried. "The blight, the witch, is burned. Her curse is broken. Can you feel it?" "Amen," the crowd sighed, a low, guttural moan. "But the root remains. The unbeliever, the spy. He is still out there, in the darkness. His sin is the last shadow. And the fire demands him." He was working them up again. My hands were slick with sweat. "Jeb, now?" "Not yet." Malachi paced the stage. "We sent our hunters. We sent our righteous flame. But the devil is slippery. He hides. He hides in the dark, just as he hides in the heart." He pointed into the woods, directly at the shadows where we were hidden. I felt as if he could see me. But he cannot hide from the eye of the flame. The fire sees all, and it will call him. He raised his arms to their fullest extent, his head thrown back, a posture of absolute arrogant power. "Now," Jeb hissed. He broke left, toward the wagons and the kegs. I took a deep breath, and I ran. I burst from the trees, my city clothes torn and smeared with mud and soot, my hair wild. I ran straight toward the stage, waving my arms. "Stop," I screamed, my voice cracking with genuine terror. "You're all damned! He's a liar!" The effect was instantaneous and absolute. The entire crowd, 50 men, women, and children, froze. Their heads turned, as one, toward me. The silence was deafening, broken only by the roar of the fire. I had stepped from the shadows into the full, hellish red light. I was the focus of every eye. They looked at me with a mixture of confusion, hatred, and a strange, sudden fear. I was the boogeyman, made real. Even Malachi on his stage faltered. His arms lowered slightly. A slow smile spread across his face. "Fools," he boomed, recovering. "The devil has come to his own execution. Seize him." But they didn't. They were still trapped in the moment, in the shock of my appearance. I had broken the spell. I saw Jeb, a shadow among shadows, reach the wagons. He wasn't grabbing his wife. He was grabbing a keg. "He's a liar!" I screamed again, pointing at Malachi. "He poisoned Sarah Suttree. He brought the blight." A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. They looked from me to Malachi. He lies!" Malachi sputtered, his composure cracking for the first time. "He is the poison. Take him. Take him for the fire." A few men, the ones with the mark on their shirts, started to move toward me. Silas Croft was one of them. "Get him!" I was out of time. I backed away toward the fire. "Jeb, now!" I screamed. Jeb moved. He didn't go for Sarah. He hoisted a keg of kerosene, a full 50-pound keg, onto his shoulder. "Malachi!" he roared. His voice, the voice of their neighbor, their friend, did stop them. Malachi spun, his eyes wide. "Jebediah, what is the meaning of this? Join your brothers." You killed her," Jeb said, his voice a low, terrible sound. He began to walk, not toward his wife, but toward the stage, toward Malachi. "He's mad," Malachi shrieked, taking a step back. "He's been tainted. Stop him." But no one moved. They were caught between two prophets. "You used me," Jeb continued, his pace quickening. "You used my pain. You used my God. And you burned Elspeth." He was 10 feet from the stage. "And now, preacher," Jeb said, his face illuminated by the giant burning cross, "you're gonna have your revival." With a roar of pure primal grief, Jeb Suttree threw the keg. It spun end over end, striking the stage at Malachi's feet. The flimsy wood of the keg splintered. Kerosene, black and oily, flooded the stage, splashing onto Malachi's legs and robes. Malachi looked down at his soaked boots. He looked up at Jeb. He opened his mouth, but he didn't have time to scream. Jeb raised his shotgun, the one he'd been carrying all night. He didn't aim at Malachi. He aimed at the base of the burning cross just behind the stage. He fired both barrels. The shot sent a shower of massive, burning embers and flaming splinters raining down, directly onto the kerosene-soaked stage. The world exploded. The kerosene ignited not with a whoosh, but with a concussion. A blast of white-hot fire erupted from the stage, throwing Malachi backward, instantly transforming him from a man into a screaming, human torch. His sermon of the cleansing flame had found its final, true convert. The crowd screamed. The spell was not just broken, it was shattered. The hypnotic religious fervor vanished, replaced by raw animal panic. The God they had been worshiping had just, in a blast of fire, consumed its own prophet. Malachi thrashed on the ground, a horrifying, writhing shape of fire, his screams inhuman. Jeb Suttree didn't watch. The moment he fired, he ran. He vaulted over the low railing onto the burning stage, ignoring the flames that licked at his own legs, and ran to his wife. "Sarah!" he roared, pulling at the ropes. The crowd was stampeding. They were running away from the fire, away from the stage, trampling each other in their haste to escape to the darkness of the woods. I was frozen. My distraction had become an apocalypse. "Eli," Jeb's voice. "Help me." The ropes were thick and the knots were tight. I ran forward, jumping onto the stage, the heat searing my face. The burning effigy behind us was crackling, its structure failing. I pulled my pocket knife. "Hold her," I yelled. I sawed at the ropes, the flames from the stage floor burning my hands. Sarah Suttree was conscious, her eyes wide with terror, but she was too weak to move. Malachi had finally stopped screaming. He lay in a smoking, blackened heap. The rope gave way. Jeb scooped his wife into his arms, his own overalls smoking. "The woods!" I yelled. "We have to—" Crack. A sound like a cannon shot. We looked up. The great burning cross, the 40-foot idol of pine, was falling. It was tilting in agonizing slow motion directly toward us. "Jeb, run!" We dove from the stage, Jeb cradling his wife, me tumbling head over heels. We hit the dirt just as the colossal, fiery structure collapsed onto the stage, and the clearing, and the wagons. A tidal wave of fire, sparks, and superheated air washed over us. The kegs of kerosene by the wagons went up, one after another, in a series of earth-shaking explosions. The fire, which had been contained to the effigy, was now everywhere. The clearing was an inferno. The trees at the edge of the woods were catching, the fire climbing the pines, turning them into giant candles. "This way!" Jeb yelled, his voice raw. He knew these woods. He ran, not toward the town, but up the ridge, away from the path the panicked crowd had taken. I followed, dragging my satchel, my lungs filled with smoke. We ran, plunged once more into the darkness, but this time, the darkness was our only friend. Behind us, the entire valley was being swallowed by a wildfire, a self-inflicted wound. We ran until our legs gave out. We collapsed on a high, rocky bluff, perhaps a mile away. From there, we could see it all. The revival clearing was a lake of fire, but the fire hadn't stopped. It was moving, driven by the wind that Malachi's own firestorm had created. It was sweeping down the valley, directly toward Whisper Creek. "Jeb," I whispered, pointing. He watched, his face blank, as the fire, the cleansing flame he had helped create, reached the first houses. The dry, weary planks of the town didn't stand a chance. The general store, the livery, the blacksmith, they went up, one by one. It's all gone," Jeb murmured. He held Sarah, who had mercifully passed out, close to his chest. We watched, the two of us, a broken farmer and a disgraced journalist, as the town of Whisper Creek and the covenant of the cleansing flame and the gospel of Brother Malachi were all purged from the earth. The night of the burning cross had ended, not in salvation, but in annihilation. The fire, summoned to cleanse the sin, had decided that the sin was the valley, and it was burning it all clean. We stayed on that ridge until the first sick, gray light of dawn. The air was unbreathable, choked with acrid smoke that stung the eyes and coated the tongue. The valley below, which had been a sea of fire, was now a sea of charcoal. Jeb had not spoken a word in hours. He just held his wife, rocking her gently, his eyes fixed on the smoldering ruin of his life. Sarah was breathing, a shallow, ragged breath. The potion, or the terror, had broken her fever, but left her in a deep, death-like stupor. "Jeb," I said, my voice a dry croak, "we have to move. The fire, it's still moving up the ridges." He nodded, a slow, numb gesture. He stood, lifting Sarah as if she weighed nothing. "Where?" he asked. "Away, west, toward the next county. There's a town. Jasper, I think. 20 miles. 20 miles. He looked down at his wife. "We'll do it," I said, with a confidence I did not feel. "We have to." We walked. We walked through a landscape of ghosts. The forest was black, the trees skeletal, the ground a carpet of hot ash. The silence was profound. No birds, no insects, just the crunch of our boots on the cinders. We avoided what was left of Whisper Creek. We didn't need to see it up close. The smell of burned wood, burned earth, and something else, something sickeningly sweet and final, was enough. I wondered about the townspeople, the ones who fled into the woods. Had they escaped? Or had the fire, which moved with unnatural speed, trapped them in the hollows? We walked all day. Jeb, fueled by a grief so deep it had become a kind of strength, never flagged. He carried Sarah while I, my hands burned and bleeding, carried my satchel of notes, my proof. That evening, we stumbled upon a spring that the fire had miraculously spared. We drank the cool water and bathed Sarah's face. Her eyes fluttered open. "Jeb," she whispered. Jeb Suttree fell to his knees, burying his face in her lap. "Sarah, oh God, Sarah. It's so dark," she whispered, looking at the smoke-filled sky. The preacher, he's gone, Sarah," Jeb wept. "He's gone. It's all gone. I had a dream," she murmured. "A dream of fire and a bad man and Elspeth." "Hush," Jeb said, stroking her hair. "Hush now. We're safe." I turned away, giving them the moment. I looked back at the pillar of smoke that marked the grave of Whisper Creek. Granny Elspeth, Jeb Suttree, Sarah, myself. We were the survivors. But what had we survived? I thought of Malachi. Where had he come from? What was he? A simple madman? Or was Elspeth right? Was he just a vessel, a walker, who had given voice to the hunger of the land itself? He spoke of the cleansing flame, and in the end, the flame had come. It had consumed him, his followers, and the very land they stood on. The covenant was fulfilled, but not in the way any of them had intended. I looked at my notebook, its cover singed. I had the story, I had the song, and it was, as Elspeth had promised, a dirge. It took us 2 more days to reach civilization. We were a shocking sight when we stumbled into the outskirts of Jasper. 2 men, blackened by soot, our clothes in tatters, one of us carrying a woman who looked more dead than alive. We were taken to the county sheriff, a portly man named Brody, who listened to our story with a look of profound, weary disbelief. I told him everything. I laid my notebooks on his desk. I told him about Malachi, about the sermons, the marks of the covenant, the poisoning of Sarah, the siege of Elspeth's cabin, the burning of the great effigy, the fire. Jeb sat beside me, silent, his head bowed, corroborating my story with a single slow nod when asked. When I finished, Sheriff Brody leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. "Mr. Pope," he said, "that is quite a tale of mass hysteria, poison, arson, murder." "It's the truth," I said, my voice hoarse, every word. "A 40-foot burning symbol, a whole town dancing?" He sighed. "Son, I've been sheriff of this county for 20 years. I've seen things, moonshiners' feuds, family, disputes. But this, go see for yourself." Jeb Suttree spoke, his voice dead. "Go to Whisper Creek, see what's left." "Oh, we will," Brody said. "We've seen the smoke. We reckoned it was a wildfire. Got a wire this morning from the rangers up in Harrison. They're sending a team." He arranged for Sarah to be taken to the town doctor. He put us in a cell. "For your own protection," he said, though it felt like an accusation. We sat in that cell for 3 days. On the 3rd day, Sheriff Brody returned. His face was pale, and he looked like he hadn't slept. He smelled of sweat and ash. He unlocked our cell. "You're free to go." You went there?" I asked, standing up. I rode as far as the pass." He wouldn't meet my eye. "The Rangers, they're calling it the worst wildfire in Arkansas history. A crown fire. Jumped from treetop to treetop. So hot it vitrified the sand in the creek bed." "Did you find them?" Jeb asked. "The others?" Brody shook his head. "We found nothing. Not a soul. Not a body." "That's impossible," I said. "There were 50, 60 people. The Rangers say a fire that hot. It don't leave bodies, Mr. Pope. It leaves ash. Just ash." He finally looked at me, his eyes haunted. "We found the clearing, or what was a clearing. The ground is fused, and in the center, there's a shape, a shadow, burned into the rock, like a great barbed star." He slid my notebooks across the desk. "I'm keeping this one," he said, tapping the first one. "The official report. The rest are yours." "The report?" "The report will say a wildfire, likely sparked by a moonshiner's still, destroyed the valley of Whisper Creek, An isolated, tragic accident. But that's not what happened, I protested. Malachi. The murders. Brother Malachi? Brody said, his voice hard. Never heard of him. And according to the state register, there is no town of Whisper Creek. Just a few scattered, unregistered homesteads. As of today, it's an uninhabited valley. A tragedy. You're burying it, I whispered, the cold reality dawning. You're covering it up. I am containing it, Mr. Pope, he snapped, his composure breaking. What do you want me to write? That a preacher summoned something? That convinced a whole town to burn themselves alive? That a cult of fire worshippers committed mass suicide? That's not history, son. That's a nightmare. And nightmares, they're best forgotten. Folks around here have enough to fear from the dark without this. He stood up. Take your notes. Take Mr. Suttree and his wife, and go. Go back to St. Louis, and never come back. Some stories. They're just too evil for the history books. This is one of them. We left Jasper that afternoon. Jeb had sold his wagon and mules, the ones he'd left in town, for pennies on the dollar. It was just enough for 3 train tickets north. Sarah was weak, but the doctor said she would live. The poison, whatever it was, had been purged by the fire and the terror. She sat in the train car, her hand in Jeb's, looking out the window at the passing landscape, her eyes vacant. She remembered nothing after Malachi had given her the potion. Perhaps she was the lucky one. Jeb and I, we remembered everything. We sat in silence for the long, clattering journey to St. Louis. We were 2 men from different worlds, bound by a shared trauma that no one else on earth would ever, or could ever understand. When we arrived at the busy, soot-stained St. Louis station, the noise and the crowds were a physical assault. People hurried past, shouting for porters, reading newspapers filled with stories of politics and tariffs. It was 1911 again. The 17th century had finally, violently, released its grip on us. Jeb turned to me on the platform. Reckon this is it, Mr. Pope. What will you do, Jeb? Sarah, she has kin in Missouri, north of here, farmers. We can work. We can start again. He looked at his hands, scarred from the fire and the ropes. But I don't think I'll ever be able to look at a fire again. Or a church. Jeb, what we saw what we saw, he said, his voice firm, cutting me off. He didn't want to talk about it. He wanted to live. You're gonna write it, ain't you? Your story. I nodded, clutching my satchel. I am. Good. He looked at me, the simple farmer I had first heard about. Good. Folks should know, even if they don't believe. He nodded at me, a final, grim farewell. He took Sarah's arm, and the 2 of them, survivors of an American apocalypse that would never be recorded, disappeared into the crowd. I never saw Jebediah Suttree again. I spent the next year trying to publish the story. I went to my old editor. I went to his rivals. I went to the penny dreadful publishers and the high-minded magazines. They all said the same thing. It was too much. It was unbelievable. It was the ravings of a man suffering from fever. One editor suggested it was a disgraceful, slanderous fabrication against the good, God-fearing people of the Ozarks. My reputation as a disgraced journalist didn't help. I was the man who cried wolf, and now I was crying monster. Sheriff Brody was right. The world didn't want this story. It was too dark, too savage. It hinted at a rot beneath the floorboards of the new century, a capacity for madness that everyone wanted to believe we had left behind. The story was too evil for the history books, so I kept it. I locked the notebooks in a chest. I got a job as a copy editor, a quiet, thankless desk job. I lived a simple, solitary life, but I never forgot. I never forgot the smell of kerosene and pine. I never forgot the sound of the chanting, or the sight of Elspeth's cabin burning against the night sky. And I never forgot the face of Brother Malachi, wreathed in the fire he had so eagerly summoned. Sound of wind, and the faint distant echo of the mournful harmonica. I am an old man now. It is 1965. The world has changed. It has seen horrors that dwarf my own. It has seen fire fall from the sky and consumed cities whole. And yet, The small, specific horror of Whisper Creek remains, for me, the center of it all. My notebooks. They sit on my desk. The ones I buried under the floorboards of the Sutton cabin. They're still there. Or, more likely, they were consumed by the earth, turned to pulp by the damp and the years. But the ones I carried, they are my burden. History has forgotten, as I knew it would. The maps of Arkansas show a blank space, a protected wilderness area where Whisper Creek once huddled in fear. The fire of 1911 is a footnote in a forestry ledger, the Great Ozark Wildfire. No cause listed, no casualties. But sometimes I hear things. I read the papers, I listen, and I hear echoes. In the 1920s, I read a small back-page story about a revival preacher in rural Alabama who was tarred and feathered by his own congregation after his miracles were discovered to be poison. In the 1930s, I read about a charismatic prophet in the California desert who led his followers into the wilderness to meet the fire god. They were never seen again. And just last year, I saw a picture in Life magazine, a different kind of evil. Men in white robes, men who also used a burning cross. Malachi was not an anomaly, he was a symptom. The sickness, the one Elspeth warned me about, it doesn't die. It just sleeps. It waits for the right voice, the right fear, the right anger, to give it a new name and a new face. It waits for a new prophet to promise a cleansing flame. My name is Eli Pope. I was a song catcher. I went to the Ozarks in 1911 to find the old ballads. I found a new one instead. It's a story of a town that was promised salvation and given an inferno. A story of a revival so evil, it was erased by the very fire it worshipped. I am leaving these notes, my full account, to the State Historical Archive upon my death. They will no doubt file it away in a box in a dark, dusty basement. They will label it Folklore Unverified, and there it will sit. A story too evil for history, but it will be there, waiting. Because the fire never truly goes out. It just smolders, waiting for the wind to shift, and for someone, somewhere, to give it permission to burn. The harmonica tune returns, plays a final mournful phrase, and fades to silence.